Hello, guys. How's everybody doing? I hope everyone out there is having a great day so far. Now, gather around, welcome in. Let's sit around the campfire because we're about to have a conversation. A little bit of a serious conversation at that. If you've been a fan of sports like I have, then I'm sure you've heard this about your favorite sport. And it's the question of whether or not these games are rigged. And it's a very serious topic. It questions the integrity of the game, of the sport, of the athletes, and ultimately it makes people feel like what they are watching is much less an actual sport and much closer to the WWE. Now, before we get started, please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. It really helps the channel out, and I really, really appreciate it. As y'all know, we're trying to take this right here to the moon, and we are not stopping until it gets there. So thank you so much, and welcome to the conversation. So let's take a listen to this right here.
I got a question for Shaq and Kenny.
Okay.
The Rudy Gobert thing.
What about it?
What did you think about it?
What do you do?
He did that money thing and got fined.
Oh, you gotta find him.
What?
Because you're basically insinuating that refs are getting paid.
Yeah.
Oh, my bad, Shaq. I didn't mean to bring up whole stuff. But you're insinuating.
Why did you not agree with that?
No, but you're insinuating the refs are getting paid at the game.
I thought he should have got suspended.
Yeah,
Oh, stop it. Hey, stop it. You're going too far now.
No.
Going too far. Stop it.
Shaq, let me tell you something. The one thing we can never do in sports, ever, is make people think
that the game is not
it's not fixed. If we ever get to the point, any sport, if they found out, it would ruin the sport. It would ruin the sport if people thought it was fixed. And they fined Luka Doncic. They had fined Rudy Gobert before. I thought they should have suspended him.
And there is Charles Barkley, Shaquille O'Neal, and Kenny Smith's take on whether or not what Rudy Gobert did, which was throw up the money sign at the referee, was foul or play, and what it means to the sport. As Kenny Smith said, they made an example of Rudy Gobert because he was insinuating that these referees are getting paid to throw these games or to dictate a game a certain way. And as Charles Barkley said, in any sport, and a lot of people were on him because he said if anyone found out, as if to say this is a known thing in the industry, we can't let people know that the game is actually rigged and they know who's going to win and who's not going to win and so on and so forth. And that obviously questions the integrity of the game. And it goes to the very top. And it makes you question, beyond the referees, what is the NBA's role in all of this? And before I continue, let's take a listen to what Andre Iguodala and Evan Turner had to say about this topic. Now, for some clarification, right? Andre Iguodala is a 19-year veteran of the NBA. He is now retired, right? But a 19-year vet, was an all-star, made all defensive first team and second team one time each, was a 4-time NBA champion, one-time NBA Finals MVP, and is currently the acting executive director of the National Basketball Players Association. And he was on that committee for 10 years prior to that during his NBA career. So a guy that still works with the NBA, whose goal is to protect the players, right? So let's hear what he and his best friend Evan Turner had to say about this topic.
What level he was playing at for that week? Like that was.
Yeah, we tried. I mean, the refs tried to give this. Like, refs tried to give Cleveland that game. You saw that?
Yes.
I watch everything.
Yes.
Fam. Oh yeah, we had
allegedly. They was trying to. Allegedly.
Hey. We had Klay Thompson foul trouble. Yeah, y'all got you too quick with. Get him out. Yeah.
As players, we can't say so. You just got to play along.
And so let's take a moment and take a look at what they were talking about in that instance. So what Andre Iguodala was referring to was the 2015 NBA Finals, which was between the Golden State Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers. And he's specifically talking about Game 6 of that NBA Finals, which was a closeout game for the Warriors. They were entering that game up 3-2 on the Cleveland Cavaliers, on the verge of a championship. And this game took place on June 16, 2015. And in this game, the whistle played a role. And it's not something that happened immediately, right? It was not immediate at all. In the first quarter, the Golden State Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers had 4 fouls as a team and 3 for the Cavaliers, right? In quarter 2, however, the Golden State Warriors picked up 9 personal fouls to the Cleveland Cavaliers' 6. At the half, both Andre Iguodala, who ended up winning NBA Finals MVP and was doing a real great job of having an impact in the game since he started, and also Klay Thompson had 3 personal fouls going into halftime. And one of their strongest bench players, Sean Livingston, also had 2. You going through the third quarter, it was a pretty normal game still. And the only reason the Cleveland Cavaliers had those personal fouls in the fourth quarter was because when the clock was winding down. But when you look at the game, Klay Thompson fouled out. Draymond Green had 5 fouls. Andre Iguodala had 4 fouls. Sean Livingston had 3 fouls. And, you know, you look on the other side, Dellavedova eventually had 6, and so did Iman Shumpert. LeBron James only had 3, but there was a concerted effort to try and take the stars of the Golden State Warriors out of the game with the whistle. And now let's continue on with the clip.
You got to play the game, but when you think about it, it's like, how many games was this happening?
But did you feel that game, that last game where fouls was being called?
No, I tell people all the time, I was like, listen, the closeout game is the hardest game in your life. And they be like, why? And I can't say. I can't say, but I'm like, no, fam, listen, like, this is the hardest game you'll ever play in your life.
I remember we were about to play Game 7, 2012. So we were about to play the Celtics or whatever.
Game 7.
So I'm hyped as hell. I'm like, yeah, bro, we got a Game 7. Like, woo out the bam. Like, this is going to be lit. So Eldon's like, you know we're going to have to win by 15 just to win by 1. So I'm like, what you mean? He's like, bro, this is the NBA. It's entertainment. Like, LeBron is in the Heat or waiting. would you rather watch the Celtics or the Sixers play the Heat? I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm on the team. I wouldn't even watch the Sixers play the Heat type shit. Like,
you gotta appreciate it.
But mind you, I'm young, 22, 23. I'm like, damn. You know what I mean? So it's like, so we get in this game. You know how much money the NBA is gonna lose? Like this, type shit. That's why I'm telling you, take M's and M's from this. I'm like, what? He say millions of memories because this is entertainment.
And that was a lot to unpack right there. So let's take a look first at the series that Evan Turner was talking about. And this was the 2012 NBA Eastern Conference semifinals. And this was Game 7 is what he was talking about specifically. And in that series, the Philadelphia 76ers were taking on the Boston Celtics in Boston for Game 7. And, if as y'all know, that Boston Celtics team had Rajon Rondo, Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, one of the most popular teams in that time. Like Evan Turner said, the Miami Heat were waiting for them. And so in terms of putting eyes on the game and on a series, the Boston Celtics made more sense to put them in front of the Miami Heat. And this game was extremely low scoring, and to be 100% honest, was extremely close through 3 quarters. After the third quarter, the game was 55-52. The Boston Celtics were up. And that was when Elton Brand, which was their power forward at the time, which is a really good player in this league, picked up 4 personal fouls in the fourth quarter. 6 fouls and got him out of there. And when you think about how important a player like Elton Brand was going down the stretch, he could knock down free throws, he could isolate, he could run pick and rolls. He was a very key part of the Philadelphia 76ers at the time. And he seemingly was taken out of the game by the referees. In both of these instances, the referees seem to have tried to take the game into their own hands. One way to do it is to blow the whistle, right? To make a lot of calls, to call violations, personal foul calls, because outside of taking a player out of the game because they're in foul trouble, you can frustrate them with turnovers. They're getting yelled at by their coach. It ruins the flow of their offense, of that player trying to find rhythm. And the same could be said by not blowing the whistle, especially when it's a player that is attempting to consistently make contact, to go to the free throw line, to draw fouls. Not blowing the whistle also impacts them in that way. They start complaining. Now they're talking to the ref more than they're focused on the game, and it takes them out of the game. 2 ways that NBA referees can really impact a basketball game. And that brings me to Tim Donaghy. Tim Donaghy was an NBA referee from 1994 to 2007. He had refereed 772 regular season games and 26 playoff games. And he was found guilty of fixing games and served 15 months in prison. And in his documentary on Netflix, it's called Untold Stories, Flagrant Foul. The untold story of Tim Donaghy and what happened in that situation. And he spoke about the brotherhood that exists between referees. You know, the NBA players always talk about how there's 450 of them. It's a small group that gets to have the opportunity to play professional basketball in the NBA. And they take a lot of pride in that. And there's a brotherhood and a camaraderie that exists because it's a fraternity that they're in, that only they can understand each other. In a weird way, I think the referees have a similar bond among them, because they also have to rise through the ranks. They have to go through high school games, college games, before they can make it into the NBA. And when they get to the NBA, there's only 60 of them. You see, Tim Donaghy, his argument early on when he was denying fixing games was the fact that he was one of the best referees in terms of percentages in calling NBA games. He was third in a staff of 60. The NBA grades them game to game. And these guys travel together, they do games together, they see each other constantly, so they build relationships. They start understanding what gets them to take, what they like, what they don't like, what players they like, what players they don't like, what coaches they like, what coaches they don't like, GMs, so on and so forth. So they learn all of these things about the referees in the league. And what Tim Donaghy explained was that sometimes they act on it. If a referee had a gripe against a certain player, they'll make the calls. They'll do this. They'll do that. And a part of why their percentages are so high, and many people might not understand this, is because over the course of an NBA game, you can call some kind of a violation damn near every possession. Damn near. And there are certain players that, let's call it what it is, they get away with certain things. For example, was Allen Iverson, who used to carry the ball on his crossovers. And there was an instance where allegedly Allen Iverson had threatened one of the referees. And so Tim Donaghy and the crew in the game after that incident decided to take it in their own hands. And they kept calling the violation on Allen Iverson. It was a pact that they made. They were trying to defend their own. And so they took Allen Iverson out of that game, essentially. And the reality of that, beyond the guilty verdict, right? We can assume that there were other people that were gambling, but the interpersonal relationships between referees and the players and coaches, to me, was what stuck out. And so, what does the NBA have to do with all of this? Well, in the case itself, right, the NBA was found innocent. But are there residual effects from this? Now, one of Tim Donaghy's closest friends in the NBA especially was Scott Foster. And during the 2006-2007 season, which was the season that was in question for Tim Donaghy, right? He had made 134 phone calls to Scott Foster before and after basketball games. In 42 out of the 45 games that Tim Donaghy had called, he called Scott Foster 134 times. Before and after games, and sometimes in between. So they had a really close relationship. And Scott Foster ended up being innocent of any charges. They investigated him as well, and he ended up innocent. However, that doesn't take away from the culture that Tim Donaghy spoke about in the NBA on the way referees will make calls based on who they like or don't like, or who they favor or don't favor. And the other thing that Tim Donaghy was very adamant about was the fact that the NBA was also giving orders. For example, if there is a new rule in place, they'll tell referees to crack down on that move or on that rule to make sure that they can implement it. Maybe there's a call that a coach had sent in. So now they have to crack down on that. So that has always seemed to exist. And, you know, when you have that reality, this culture that exists with the referees, and a Scott Foster who was really tight with Tim Donaghy back in the day and is still a referee now and has a actual problem with a NBA player, you know, that's when issues arise. So let's hear from Chris Paul what he has to say about Scott Foster.
You were chirping at Scott Foster a bit, so I was just wondering, you know, KD drew contact, he went to the line, and you were...
Yeah, it's personal. Yeah, we had a situation some years ago, and it's personal. You know what I mean? Like, the league know, everybody know, it's been a meeting and all that, and it's just a situation with my son, and so it's, so I'm okay with a ref talking, you know, saying whatever, saying just don't use the tech to get your point across. You know what I mean? So.
You said it's a situation with your son?
Yeah, they know what it is. He know what it is too. So it's just I had a meeting with him, my dad, Doc Rivers, Bob Delaney, and all us. So.
Excuse me. So there's Chris Paul speaking about this Scott Foster situation. Now, allegedly, and this is just all rumors, allegedly, Chris Paul's son, who's been around the NBA ever since he was in diapers, probably. He's always been around Chris Paul, especially in the Clippers era. He was just always around the team, around the arena, around the games. And allegedly, he was playing around in the tunnel, and Scott Foster and the crew were on their little cart, and he was in the way, and apparently he had cussed out Chris Paul's son. And just like any parent, Chris Paul had an issue with that. And ever since then, they have had this ongoing thing. And Chris Paul's record against Scott Foster is mind-blowing. You know, the fact that... Here, we'll take a look at this. So this was in, let me see. This was in 2023, right? This was the Phoenix Suns. Okay. His playoff record is now 3-17 in the playoffs when Scott Foster is officiating the game. On 5 different teams at that. So Chris Paul at that point had lost 13 straight Foster officiated playoff games before the Suns' 123-109 win over the Clippers in round 1 of the 2023 postseason. And when you think about the fact that there's an actual stat like that, that is well known. This is public knowledge. This is something that different analysts have spoken about, players have spoken about. It is unacceptable for the NBA to still allow this man to referee games, to allow his judgment and relationship to allow his relationship to cloud his judgment on these games, to call them and sway games a certain way because he doesn't like a player. And it's things like that that makes you raise an eyebrow at the NBA and say, are you guys really fixing these games? Are you guys really trying to dictate who wins or does not win these games? And the short answer to that, as we're here 26 minutes later, is yes. Yes. Absolutely, the NBA has an agenda because they are a business. And their job is to promote the game of basketball and put butts in seats at these arenas and put the game in front of eyes for millions of people to see. That is their objective. And so when it comes to highlighting certain star players, certain big market teams, and having a preference as to who wins a championship, because like Evan Turner said, they are well aware of all the narratives and the storylines that are going on in the NBA. Now, their script is subject to change. And to the people that think everything from every movement to every play is manipulated and controlled, I think that's ridiculous. I think y'all are giving these people too much credit to have the ability to have that much control over everything, because ultimately all you're doing is taking away from the work that these athletes do, because they are truly the ones that keep this game pure. And Chris Paul, who was on the Golden State Warriors last year, obviously spoke about not being a fan of Scott Foster. And Draymond Green provides this perspective when it comes to the referees.
I love Scott, by the way. You know why I love Scott? Because Scott, to me, like, where I go wrong is like the referees that act like they cool with you, and then the moment the game starts, you can't say hi. And I'm just like, bro, you just like was laughing with me and like saying hi.
I never knew that was your man, though. I never knew that was your man.
Scott, because Scott, I know what I'm going to get. Like, I don't have to guess what I'm going to. I know what I'm getting.
Damn
with
right
Scott,
you knew what you was going to get every time you played against us.
And I really think that over the years, NBA players in their own way have been alluding to all of these things. When players talk about, they they want the respect of the other players in the league, and they don't really care about the awards. When players talk about how championships aren't everything, when champions talk about how you need a bit of luck to get there, I think all of these little tidbits are their PC way of talking about how these games are not what they seem to be at all times. And it's up to the players to navigate these waters. What Draymond is talking about in that clip with Chris Paul is the game within a game that the players play. And the reality is, all 450 players in the NBA don't understand this. They don't get it, they don't know how to play it, or they just can't see what's going on, right? Because we've talked about the relationship between referees and players, referees and coaches. If you've watched basketball long enough, if you've watched the NBA long enough, this is a known thing. Game to game, they call the games differently. You'll hear broadcasters talk about, oh, okay, they're not going to be able to get away with stuff tonight based on the way that they call certain fouls or certain things early in the game, or they're going to let them be physical tonight. But that's accepted. You know, Tim Donaghy spoke about how there are certain calls that they wouldn't make on Michael Jordan. There's a certain spin move that the NBA was trying to crack down on, and Michael Jordan was basically excluded from that. And I'm hearing it and I'm saying, I thought that was a known thing, that players, star players, superstar players get the calls. Players speak about that all the time. It's accepted. You know, growing up, I learned really early to not cross a referee, to learn them by name, to have good conversations with them. You know, NBA, when players get attacked, you'll see broadcasters or analysts talk about, oh, that player was being demonstrative, because it looks like they're showing up the referee. And then you'll see other players like a LeBron or a Chris Paul that'll just be talking to the referee in a very calm, mild-mannered way. Emotions get high and they'll get out of themselves and start cussing them out and stuff sometimes as well too. But they're allowed more leeway because 80-90% of the time it's a good conversation that they're having with the referees. The players have turned everything into a game. And I think that's something that some viewers, some casual fans forget. That this is, in fact, a game. And all of the interpersonal relationships, the media, the money involved, all of these things are a part of the game. And it's up to the players to decide how they want to go about it. It's the same thing as, you know, if you've ever played like Halo 3 or something growing up, or these single player games, and you beat it and you unlock a harder difficulty, or in Halo you get the skulls and you can unlock certain things, right? Some of them give you invincibility, some of them gives you less health, some of them make the game more challenging. There's more bosses, there's more this, there's more that. And you have to navigate each level. That's kind of how the NBA is. The thinkers thrive in the NBA because they take everything into account. right? If you've ever heard someone talk about how Gary Payton is talking to everyone in the game, the referees, the coach, the this, the fan, the da, the da, the da. Certain players understand that there is this aspect of the game that you have to get on a referee's good side. That you have to do this, you have to do that. The reality is no one has ever been called the same. Offensive players get away with a lot more if they're a skilled and a well-known offensive player. They might get away with the push-off. They may get away with an extra step here and there. And then on the other side, if you're a well-known defensive player, you get away with a little bit more physicality, a little bit more holding. Maybe you'll trip someone. Maybe you'll flop. You get away with these things because of your reputation. And a part of that reputation comes from campaigning yourself. As we've seen in this season, what did we say coming in? It was Victor Wembanyama's Defensive Player of the Year award to lose. And in the first week, Anthony Davis starts talking about the Defensive Player of the Year award. Draymond Green a week later starts talking about the Defensive Player of the Year award. Because they have to campaign and put their name out there. Otherwise, people won't notice. And that's the thing about the NBA, right? You can choose how you want to play the game. There's pros and cons to everything. You can choose to be friendly with the referees and speak to them in a mild-mannered way, or, you know, be that person. And then you get called the teacher's pet. You get called the suck up. You get called the pussy. You get called this. You get called that. But you get certain calls that are beneficial. They'll hear you out. They'll be more lenient towards you. And then on the other side, you could just be the ultimate contrarian and just not give a fuck and fuck the referee, fuck the NBA, you this, you that. And then you get called a hero because you stuck it to the man in suits, essentially. But you're not getting the award recognition, you're not getting calls, and you're getting thrown out of games. It's up to you on what type of path and what type of player you want to become. And to be 100% honest, this relationship between the referees and the players, it kind of reminds me of a typical work environment, if we're being honest. Because how many times at work are you working with someone that you don't particularly like, so when they ask you to do something, you're not really that pressed to do it right away? Or maybe you'll even forget about it. Or worse, you'll just ignore it. Oh, but when it's someone that you fuck with at work, one of your homies at work, oh, you'll do that shit right away. You'll talk with them. You'll hang out. You'll be more lenient to it. If you've ever had a manager that rocks with you, they'll let you be 5-10 minutes late. They'll let you get away with certain things. If you have a manager that don't like you, you better be there 5 minutes early or you're late. The difference is this relationship between the players and the referees impacts games that people are extremely invested in with their time and effort, but also with their money. But the same type of pettiness exists. And players are so accepting of it because, like I said, the players are the purest part of the game. Everything to them is a game. Everything is a challenge. Everything is an obstacle course. That's why you've heard players say you have to learn how to win these games. You have to figure out the puzzle every single game. Because different things happen. And you have to be so locked in to not just the game plan and what's going on in the game, but what's the referee doing? What's the other coach doing? what is the NBA thinking at this point? And that's why certain athletes get paid the millions of dollars. Because when they talk about this person is able to manipulate a game, they are literally able to manipulate a game. And the one thing that these referees and that the NBA cannot control ultimately are the players' ability to make and miss shots. Like when you go to that 2015 NBA Finals, right, where Klay Thompson fouled out, Draymond Green was in foul trouble, Andre Iguodala was in foul trouble. All of those things were true, and it made the game more difficult for the Golden State Warriors. But the Cleveland Cavaliers turned the ball over 19 times to the Golden State Warriors 9. That's the game right there. And when you think about shot making abilities, and even in today's game, right, in the NBA now, it's so predominantly a 3-point shooting league that having this conversation, I wonder how much of an impact can the whistle have on the games? Because the Golden State Warriors were impossible. They were shooting 40 feet from the basket. It was hard to enforce the whistle on them. The only way they could do it was to call fouls on the other end on Steph and Klay and Draymond and them. And like I said, that's why at the top of the food chain, the best players are thinkers. Take a Jimmy Butler, for example, right? Jimmy Butler. Not the most athletic player ever. Not the most naturally gifted scorer. But he's the ultimate competitor and a real thinker. And he always talks about how dominoes and understanding that game and being cerebral has helped him in the NBA. And it makes sense. It makes sense how there's a playoff Jimmy. Because every season is different. Different rules are being highlighted. Different players, different teams are being highlighted by the NBA. And so when you think of a Jimmy Butler and he goes through an entire regular season and he's understanding human behavior, human tendencies, he's understanding patterns that are being repeated. He's building relationships with these referees, understands what the NBA is trying to do. So when he gets into the playoffs, after he's downloaded all of this information, and he gets time to prepare from game to game for the same team, yet the most cerebral guy who's been observing every single one of you guys all year gets to dominate. And that's where you have a playoff Jimmy. Because he is a serious thinker of not just the game of basketball, but all of the other aspects that we've been talking about. And just to close this out, this is why I love to highlight players that I think are really good and great and not necessarily champions. Because as we talked about with Wemby, you have to campaign yourself for these awards. Excuse me. You know, Drew Holiday, Andre Iguodala, Tony Allen, those guys, for the most part, were considered some of the best one-on-one perimeter defenders in the NBA. And they weren't just perimeter guys. They can switch on bigs. They can do a lot. But they never campaigned for themselves, so they never got a Defensive Player of the Year. Kenyon Martin never got a all-defensive team because of the relationship he had with the NBA. And as we've talked about, there are certain teams that the NBA could prefer to go into the championship. And so if a part of that is in the NBA's plans, then we can't look at the champion as just the be all end all. It can't be the only indicator for whether a player is good or not. The team's success can't be the only indicator. We have to be able to judge guys' individual talent and what they were actually able to do on the basketball court, because as we've seen, results of these games can be altered and have been altered. But the time and the work that these players put in, that's pure. That can't be taken away. And so, yes, the NBA is rigging these games, but the players themselves keep it as pure as it possibly can be, because they have managed to turn every aspect of the game into a game. And I think that's what makes these guys special. These guys are damn near like superheroes to me. These guys are incredible. But yeah, shout out to these NBA players. Shout out to y'all for hanging out with me as always. I really appreciate it. We're trying to take this shit to the moon as always. Now, before I get out of here, please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. It really helps the channel out. We're trying to take this to the moon. And thank you so much. It's been your boy, Jayson Estrella. I'll see y'all later, man. Y'all have a great rest of y'all day. Y'all could have been anywhere on the internet, but y'all were here with me. And I appreciate you for that. So peace out. I'll see y'all later, man. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Peace, 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 peace.